Survive and Advance on the Grizzly Crew Sports Network. I am your co-host, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I want to welcome in my other two co-hosts. For today, Anthony Cervino is a co-host. He's from the Fantasy Football Show on The Grueling Truth. You can also find him on YouTube. How you doing, Anthony?
How's it going, Mike?
All right, and see, I had to introduce you first because Steve gets mad when I call somebody a co-host, but you are a co-host every Monday. So I don't really care what Risley thinks because I'm in a bad mood today anyways. And let me help me welcome to the show, 1981 national champion. Weren't you like Sugar Bear on Starsky and Hutch also, Steve? Steve Risley.
Huggy Bear.
Yeah. I thought
Antonio Fargas.
Yeah. Wait,
His son actually played football for USC.
Yeah, and his son could probably coach the Bengals. So let's go ahead. Let's start off with last Thanksgiving, which would have been Thursday night, where there was actually three what I thought were at least mildly interesting games. And Anthony hasn't been here to give us his take on all of them. We're going to start off with the Bears and Lions, Anthony. Backup quarterback comes in, wins the game for the Bears. And what's your take on the Bears? I already know what Steve's is because we talked about it Friday on our Football Frenzy show. Is this a team that you think could possibly upset and win a playoff game and end up in the NFC Championship game? Or is this just probably the third best team in the NFC and that's the way it's going to stay?
You know, I do think the Bears are a team that could make a little bit of a run here, and it's more on the defensive side of the ball. I think they have Khalil Mack, who's playing out of his mind right now. He might be the best defensive player in football again. And in their secondary, they have a couple of younger players stepping up. Bryce Callahan really came out of nowhere, and he's one of the better corners of football right now. I think that defense is good enough, and the running game is good enough for them to make a deep playoff run.
All right, Steve, my only question with the Bears is this. If you're going to beat Drew Brees or you're going to beat that Rams offense, you're going to have to probably, especially against Brees, you're going to have to score at least in the high 20s. Is this Bears offense capable with Mitch Trubisky at the helm?
That's the $10 question, Mike. I mean, it doesn't appear to be. He doesn't appear to be versatile enough or deep enough as a quarterback to find unique ways to score, which you're going to have to do against a team like New Orleans or even the Rams for that matter. And they always say defense wins championships, but I think you're right. I think the downside of the Bears moving forward beyond winning their division is I don't think they have the offensive firepower to stay with either the Rams or the Saints. And I'm going to tell you what, the way the Cowboys are coming on, they can put points on the board on you too. And so I think the biggest weakness of Achilles heel of the Bears is just their offensive firepower. It's questionable. I don't believe they can. But Stravinsky is not blown up yet. He's been adequate to get the job done, what he needs to do to win football games most of the time. They're 8-3. So, but, you know, I would not bet the farm on the Bears advancing past the Rams or the Bears or the Rams or the Saints. And it would be a hell of a match between them and the Cowboys right now.
I don't think the Bears and Cowboys would be a hell of a match. I think the NFL is boring right now. I think we already pretty much know the 4 or 5 best teams, and the fall off after those teams is huge. Let's go ahead and look at the NFC East matchup. The Washington Redskins, led by Colt McCoy, went to Dallas to play the Cowboys. The Cowboys won the game 31-23. Prescott had a great game. Ezekiel Elliott had a great game. Amari Cooper played well. But in the end, Anthony, I think your problem is you're in a close game with the Washington Redskins still. This is a team the New Orleans Saints beat half to death about a month ago in the same situation.
Yeah, but I think the Cowboys are built, again, I'm going to use the same thing that I said about the Bears on the defensive side of the ball. They're playing like a top 5 defense right now. And the Saints, they really haven't played a good defense. Okay, the Rams, maybe the Rams are a pretty good defense, but we see teams put up a lot of points on the Rams too. Yeah, I think this Cowboys defense.
The thing you got to realize is this: with the Saints, they're giving teams a lot more opportunities to score. And
they are.
The same thing with the Rams. So I watched, and we're going to talk about it in a second. I watched the Saints. The Saints defense looks damn good to me right now. And they held the Eagles to 7. They held a really good Falcons offense to 17. They held the Bengals to 14. That's their last 3 games. The game before that against the Rams, they gave up a bunch of points in the first half, but pretty much held the Rams to like a touchdown in the second half. So I think the biggest difference between the Saints and all these other teams is no other team has a defense that can match their offense. And I think with the Cowboys, it's going to be – I think the Saints, you could double Amari Cooper, and there's not a lot else that can hurt you outside of Ezekiel Elliott.
Right, but Ezekiel Elliott is that type of player who can have that type of a game, and we've seen it. He's gone over 150 yards now for a couple games in a row, all Cowboys wins. He's getting north of 20 touches a game, which he needs, but he's also catching the ball. Ezekiel Elliott's catching 6, 7, 8 passes a game now, just like Alvin Kamara and Todd Gurley. And Ezekiel Elliott, the biggest knock on him is his work in the passing game, and I think he's answering that question right now.
Yeah,
so Ezekiel Elliott is that weapon who can do that.
But see,
what about Dak Prescott's ability to run? That read option, we've seen Dak Prescott, go for over 80 yards against the Jacksonville Jaguars on that read option play. We've seen it a few times.
Yeah, but the read option is something that's not going to work in a big situation against a good defense. I mean, if you're playing the Cincinnati Bengals, it'll work all day because the defensive end's going to crash. You can pitch the ball or pull the ball and do whatever the hell you want. The read option to me is a college gimmick. I don't remember a team winning a Super Bowl with read option. It's just like the RPOs they talk about and the Eagles did last year. When the Eagles played the Patriots last year in the Super Bowl, they ran maybe 5 RPOs the entire game. It's a gimmick. I think this, when you line the Saints up and compare them to anybody, the one thing that they have is up front, offensive line, defensive line, they're just better than everybody else. On the offensive line, they are flat out better. And the thing is, Alvin Kamara also has Mark Ingram next to him. If something happens to Ezekiel Elliott, who you got? And the fact is this, Anthony, having a great running back has never been a key to winning a Super Bowl. I mean, if it was, the best all-around running back I ever saw catching the ball, everything out of the backfield was Walter Payton. And he didn't win a Super Bowl until he was well past his prime. And he
what about Emmitt Smith?
Defense. What about Emmitt Smith?
You don't think he was a pretty big catalyst why the Cowboys did what they did in the 90s?
And
I get
they
Troy.
won 3 world. They won 3 world
that was
championships.
Emmitt Smith's team. That was Emmitt Smith's team.
They won 3 world championships, and they also had the
was
best offensive line in football.
And the Cowboys are still a pretty good offensive line.
No, they're not.
They're not what they were. They're not what they were.
They're average at best. And average at best makes them one of the top 10 offensive lines in football right now because most offensive lines are terrible. The only team that I watch play, and I look at them and say, that's a great offensive line, is the New Orleans Saints. They have a Hall of Fame quarterback behind them. They don't have Dak Prescott. I mean, I'm sorry, but when you look at this and you match these teams up, there's almost no place where the Cowboys are a better team.
There's a player coming up on the Cowboys that, we've heard buzz about him in the past in camp and in the preseason, and he never really got his opportunity. And in the past couple of games, he's playing more and more and more, taking snaps away from Allen Hurns. And that's Noah Brown. Noah Brown made a pretty big play last game. He's like a hybrid player, like a hybrid tight end, something that the Cowboys were missing in their offense, so watch out for him.
Noah Brown had 1 reception for 22 yards in the win against the Redskins.
Have you watched all of his snaps?
I have watched all of his what? Snaps?
Nah.
Well, I watched the game against the Redskins.
Noah Brown. And that was a pretty big play. That was a pretty big play.
Okay. It was one play. And once again, the Saints are better at every position. They have what I think is one of the 5 greatest quarterbacks of all time at quarterback. They've got Alvin Kamara. They've got Mark Ingram, who do 2 different things. You got one that can slam it between the tackles. You got the other one that can catch the ball out of the backfield. That can run it. They got Michael Thomas at wide receiver.
How about Leighton Vander Esch and Jalen Smith?
Wow. Leighton Vander Esch and Jalen Smith.
Marcus Lawrence, Randy Gregory.
Yeah.
Tyrone Crawford. I mean, I can rattle off the Cowboys defense that are all, they're going to be Pro Bowlers.
Okay.
This is a top 5 defense.
How many of them are going to be all pro?
The Saints haven't faced a defense like the Cowboys yet that can put up a running game like the Cowboys can. I think this is going to be a closer game.
So the Rams
game.
and Todd Gurley can't put up a running game. Todd Gurley is better than Ezekiel Elliott.
With the defense.
With the defense. With the Rams' defense is a good defense. And the Cowboys' defense, when have the Cowboys played a high-powered offense this year?
Week 1 against the Carolina Panthers. I could pull up
Wait a second. The Carolina Panthers are nowhere near a high-powered offense.
You know, we had this same conversation last week. Look at Christian McCaffrey.
Wow, look at him. Look at what they've done. They're 6-5. They're a shit team with Cam Newton, who is
no defense. With no defense, and their kicker cost them the past 2 games.
Their kicker cost them. Okay, I got it. The kicker cost them. Because you know what? If you rely on a kicker, you deserve what you get. I mean, that's all I got here is this. The Carolina Panthers are led by a front-running quarterback who shows what he is when things go wrong. And he did it again yesterday when he walks off the podium because he doesn't want to answer questions because he played like shit. He's gutless. And that's all he is. And, I mean, I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. When everything was going great, he was playing great. As soon as things go wrong, he's done. And, I mean, I look at this, the last good team the Cowboys played to me, because I don't think the Redskins are a good team, whether they got Alex Smith or not, was the Houston Texans, who they lost to. And they put up 16 points. And when I look at this, the Jaguars are nothing. That's the team you scored 40 on. You scored 26 on the Lions. You scored 20 on the Giants. You scored 8 on the Panthers. You scored 13 on the Seahawks. 27 on the Eagles. 22 on the Falcons. Hell, the Bengals scored almost 40 on the Falcons. You got 31 on the Redskins. I mean, I don't see where you can sit here and say that this offense can do anything that can make them have a chance to beat the Saints, especially in a playoff situation in the Dome in January. And you don't have the head coach to do it. Sean Payton is a hell of a football coach. Jason Garrett's
I think
not.
Sean Payton could be a Hall of Fame football coach.
Oh, there's no doubt he is. I mean, it's the same thing when people talk about Drew Brees. All right, people thought, well, he's not Peyton Manning, and I'll go with Steve on this because they go, he's not Peyton Manning, he's not Tom Brady, he didn't go to all these Super Bowls. But the thing is this, and I know Steve is a little older than me even. When we were growing up, when Drew Brees went to the New Orleans Saints in the late '90s, early 2000s, the New Orleans Saints winning a Super Bowl would elicit a laugh from anybody that heard it said. Am I right, Steve?
Yeah, they're pretty hapless.
He went there and he won a Super Bowl with him. It's like Kurt Warner. People rip Kurt Warner. Kurt Warner took the freaking Rams and the Cardinals to 3 Super Bowls. I mean, so I think when you look at Drew Brees, I think you got to look at the situation he went into, which was a lot worse than a Joe Montana, because the 49ers were actually a good football team until the mid-'70s. They went to hell for a couple years, and then he brought them back. The New England Patriots had been to the Super Bowl in 1986 and 1995 or 96, before Tom Brady got there. So the teams weren't complete jokes. The Saints were a complete joke. Drew Brees got there, and he set every record known to man. He's won him a Super Bowl. I think he gets underrated big time. And to think that Dak Prescott's going to go into New Orleans and beat him in a playoff game is ludicrous.
Do we remember how good that Denver Broncos offense, that Denver Broncos team, when they went into the Super Bowl with the Seattle Seahawks, and the Seahawks, who had a defense and a running game behind Marshawn Lynch, steamrolled them 42-8.
Wait a second. You cannot do this. That Seattle Seahawks defense, since the rules have changed, is the greatest defense to ever step on a field. The Dallas Cowboys are at best in the top 10. Maybe top 5, somewhere between 5 and 10. To compare them is absolutely insane, but to compare the Broncos offense, whose offensive line was not very good, to the Saints offensive line, who was the best in football, who was the Broncos running back that year?
Was it McGahee?
No. See, this is the point. It was 3 or 4 years ago. I asked you who their running back was, and you don't even know. So we've got the Saints offensive line, Alvin Kamara, Mark Ingram, a Hall of Fame quarterback in Drew Brees, who is not playing like he's at the end of his career like Peyton Manning was. You got Michael Thomas, a young stud wide receiver. You've got Sean Payton, who's a great football coach. You had John Fox, who was average at best. He was good at getting teams to the playoffs, but couldn't do anything once. To even remotely make that comparison is just insane.
I mean, they had Peyton Manning and Demaryius Thomas, Manny Sanders.
I'll take Drew Brees over Peyton Manning any day. And they did not. This is the thing, though. This is the thing you miss, and I think this is the thing people most often miss. You know, when Bengal fans blame Andy Dalton, the Andy Dalton problem lies up front. It's the offensive line. And when you look at this, and I'll say it again, the New Orleans Saints have a great offensive line. That is the biggest difference in all of this. If the Denver Broncos, you can have the most amazing wide receivers and the greatest quarterback of all time, but if you're playing the Seattle Seahawks and your quarterback's on his ass all the time, he can't throw it to those studs. He can't hand it to that stud and get a big gain because you get overrun by the great defense. That Seattle defense was the best I've ever seen when you consider the rule changes of the last 15 or 20 years and the things they got away with and the way they played is heads and shoulders, like a million miles away from what the Dallas Cowboys are on defense right now. I think the Cowboys of Leighton Vander Esch could be that 3 or 4 years from now if they draft properly, but I think it's just you're a fan of the Cowboys. I think you let this blind you. I mean, the Saints could go lose at Dallas in the regular season. You know, I don't think it's going to happen. But
that's what I'm talking. I'm not talking about playoffs here.
But no, wait
I'm
a
talking
second.
about Thursday night.
You have to be because I don't give two.
Hey,
shits.
guys, hold on here. Are we reviewing last week's games or are we previewing next week's games?
We're not previewing anything.
We're talking about
having
the
an
Cowboys
argument.
and Saints. Let's get back into last week's games. All right, let's review. Friday is previewing next week's games. Anthony, if you want to come and join us on Friday and talk about the Saints-Cowboys.
Well, the Saints-Cowboys will be over by then.
This is the second week in a row now. We spent 16 minutes talking about the damn Cowboys.
Yeah.
All right, and it's a 6-5 team that might make the playoffs. They're not going to go anywhere if they make the playoffs.
Well, what do you want to talk about,
Steve? Move on.
Go ahead. Run it. Talk.
No, I don't want to run it. Just move on.
No. What do you want to talk about? I mean, I think the Saints-Cowboys talk is relevant. They play on Thursday, not on Friday, so we can't really have him in to talk about it on Friday. So we're breaking it down there. So whatever you want to talk about from here, Steve, go ahead.
No, I'm done. Go ahead and talk about it.
No. I mean, I don't know. I just don't see a whole lot of games here to talk about. I mean, you got the Giants-Eagles. That's not worth talking about. Bills-Jaguars. I don't think that's worth it. Raiders-Ravens, 49ers-Bucks, Patriots-Jets, Cardinals-Chargers. So, I mean, there's like 6 games worth talking about. And we will go next to the Dolphins and the Colts, which the thing that stood out to me, Steve, was this. I think the Colts played really well until yesterday, but they got away with a win. Luck threw a couple interceptions, I think. I did watch that on the Red Zone, followed it. But the thing that stands out to me is this. Is you got T.Y. Hilton, 7 receptions for 125 yards. Marlon Mack, 15 carries, 85 yards. This all goes back to the offensive line to me. And the offensive line has played they went from maybe the worst offensive line in football last year to a top 5 offensive line this year.
Yeah, they didn't even have their center. Ryan Kelly didn't even play.
Yeah.
So, I'm not going to pretend that the Colts are a playoff. If they make the playoffs, it'll be by sheer dumb luck. They're not in it right now. They're one of the top teams that are sitting on the outside. They've got to play some, Cowboys have got to come in and play. That's not going to be an easy game for them. They have to go. Do they play at Houston or does Houston come to Indianapolis?
They are at Houston after at
That's not really a good situation. You're looking at realistically at least one more loss for them. And the way they played yesterday, you see how easy a team like Miami can come in and get them. But I think the thing about the Colts is measuring progress, and probably the Colts are probably one of the more overachieving teams in the NFL this year from what our expectations were at the beginning of the year. I think if Andrew Luck doesn't get – I've read this on several sites I'm studying for. Should Luck comeback player of the year? and he's on the fringe outside talk now of MVP. Now, I get Drew Brees is going to get it, and Drew Brees deserves it. There's no doubt. But Luck is, by all accounts, coming into the fringe of like, you ought to look at talk about him as potentially having an almost MVP year. But when you got somebody like Drew Brees having the year he's having, nobody's going to touch him.
Yeah, I think he's more than fringe. I think he's top 5 anywhere.
Yeah, but nobody's going to touch Drew Brees. I mean, it's not going to happen. And it shouldn't happen because Drew Brees is having an MVP year.
Yeah, and Brees has been screwed over repeatedly by the Peyton Mannings and the Tom Brady's and not getting an MVP yet. So he's going to win it by being old and maybe the last chance you can give it to him.
The big thing about the Colts yesterday, and fortunately because it was a 4 o'clock game, I got to watch most of the game on Red Zone, is that, this is a team that's winning games that normally the last 2 or 3 years was losing. They got behind by a good chunk coming into the fourth quarter, and they pull this game out at the end and get the win and get the W. Right now, in this time of the season, W's are just important for anybody. So it doesn't matter how you win, just get the W up and not the L.
Yeah, and I would think when you look at their schedule of at the Jaguars, at the Texans, they should split that. If they beat the Texans, then you could talk about them possibly winning the division. They finish up with the Giants and the Titans. They have a home game against the Cowboys. And that home game against the Cowboys, I think, is going to be the game that tells the tale for them, Anthony.
And it's going to be a hard game because I think the Cowboys are playing great football right now. I mean, I think Amari Cooper made a hell of a difference to that football team. I think he just lit a spark in that team, and it just was a little bit of glue that came into the Cowboys and put that team together and kind of got everything cohesive there. And he's playing well for the Cowboys. So the Cowboys are a lot more dangerous now than they were before Amari Cooper. That's my opinion, as humble as it is. And I would rather face the Cowboys without Amari Cooper than have him come in and play now with Amari Cooper, because he's a dangerous player. But, yeah, Colts at best are a wild card playoff berth. Tonight's a big game with Tennessee and Texas. Tennessee's a team, you never know which Tennessee team is going to show up. And Houston, they're the cream. And if they win this game, they probably got the lock on the division at that point in time.
Yeah, because I think they're still up a couple games there.
They're up 2 right now.
Well, and that brings us to Pittsburgh, Denver, Anthony. The Steelers get beat 24-17. So my favorite team is whoever plays the Pittsburgh Steelers weekly. So my favorite team won yesterday. The Steelers dropped to 7-3-1. The Broncos are now 5-6. Case Keenum played well. The defense played well. Philip Lindsay, 14 carries, 110 yards, 8 yards a carry. Do the Broncos have a shot to get a wild card spot here, Anthony? Anthony. You there, Anthony? All right, so Steve, what's your take? Do the Broncos have a shot to make the playoffs?
You've already got, what is their record now?
5-6.
5-6? I don't think so. I think because now you've got the Chargers locking down one playoff spot or wild card spot. You got how many teams are at 6-5 now?
I don't know.
Colts are 6-5. Who else is at 6-5?
3 or 4. Doesn't
3 or 4. So
I
don't think
this is the thing. I thought that the same as you did until I look at their schedule. Next week they play the Cincinnati Bengals. That should make them 6-6. They play the 49ers, 7-6. They host the Browns, 8-6. They go to the Raiders, 9-6. Then they host the Chargers. I think this is a team that can make the playoffs just because of that schedule.
Well, yeah, I mean, if their schedule's that week, then, yeah, so be it.
All right, Anthony, you there? I guess we lost Anthony. All right, let's go on to the I don't want to talk about the Bengals. Do we have to talk about the Bengals? Nobody wants to hear about the Bengals. We'll talk about them in a minute. Let's see. So I do. I think the Broncos could make the playoffs here. I think the Broncos could be the biggest threat to the Colts not getting into the playoffs. Let's go on. Chargers beat the Cardinals. We knew that was going to happen. But injuries can kill you. Packers-Vikings. Are the Packers dead? They look dead to me, Steve.
Look dead to me. I mean, like I said, I've said this all along about what's his name? 12. Rodgers. It just he's a big player now, not a consistent winner anymore. I mean, he when he has great games, the Packers are going to be very dangerous. When he doesn't, like last night, then they're very beatable because there's not much to go around them besides just Aaron Rodgers in his legendary arm. So I don't think there's any consistency there. I don't think they have enough oomph to put a winning streak together to get by the Vikings and the Bears. And I just don't see it happening. I think they're done, which may spell the end of McCarthy.
Yeah,
is what I know you're calling for.
I think he's done anyways. I've been calling for that since his second year there. So I just don't think he's very good. Oh, all right. Anthony is back because he had a stray animal. Anthony.
Yes.
Denver Broncos. Can they make the playoffs?
I think they would have to obviously win out, but the defense, I love the way they're playing. Bradley Chubb, he's starting to play like the top 10 pick that he was. It's all on Case Keenum, but Case Keenum has done it before last year with Minnesota. It's almost unfolding in a similar fashion, and they're two very similar teams. The Vikings had an explosive running game and a very good defense and a couple of good wide receivers, and it's a similar situation for Case Keenum here. It would also have to take a collapse from the Los Angeles Chargers.
Well, see, I don't think it has to make the playoffs, though, because if you look at the Broncos' schedule, that's what me and Steve were just talking about. They play the Bengals, the 49ers, the Browns, and the Raiders the next 4 games. They could easily be 9-6 going into that last game against the Chargers in probably what wouldn't be great weather in Denver, and they've already beaten the Chargers once.
No, what I'm saying is that the Chargers would have to be out of the playoff mix. It's going to be one or the other. I don't see 3 teams from the West going in.
Why? Where do you see
they can. That legally, they can, though.
Yes, they can. And my thing is
they can.
Who would be your other wild card team then, Anthony?
We could see the Ravens make a run. We could see, you know how I feel about the Colts. And then there's the Houston Texans.
Well, the Texans are going to win their division, probably.
Technically win the division. And Anthony, while you were away, I was vehemently defending the Cowboys for you.
No, he wasn't.
Talking about the Colts game, thinking it's the most difficult game the Colts will play the rest of the season.
All right, here's my problem with the Chargers, though.
That's right. They do play each other.
The Chargers' schedule, their next game, they go to Pittsburgh. Then they host Cincinnati. But then they go to Kansas City. They host the Ravens, and they go to the Broncos. I mean, that's not an easy schedule, which I think makes it rough on them. And I just don't think the Ravens are very good. I mean, they won yesterday.
Well, the Ravens have the Ravens are the other wild card team right now, aren't they? Are they sitting?
Yeah, I think so. They were before yesterday.
They're sitting in the second wild card spot.
They are. But as long
the
as
Colts
Lamar
are the first
Jackson,
alternate right now.
Yeah, as long as Lamar Jackson's playing, they're not going to be a playoff team. I mean, they played the Bengals and the Raiders. They're the only 2 teams that could lose to Lamar Jackson right now outside of the 49ers. The Ravens go to Atlanta next week, which you never know when Atlanta's going to show up and put up 40. But they go to Kansas City still. They go to San Diego. They do host the Ravens and the Buccaneers, so I think 9-7 is probably the cap for them. But I don't count them out. I'm just saying I could see Denver very easily ending up 10-6, Anthony.
Yeah, what's their record now? They need to go
5-6, but when you look at it, they're the favorite in every game they're going to play, except for maybe the Chargers game. But they're probably the favorite there too because it's at home. So, all right, guys. We're going to go ahead and...
Hey, Mike, let me ask you a question real quick. Would Phillip Rivers be having an MVP year had it not be, again, kind of like Luck, if not be for Drew Brees? Would he be having an MVP year?
To tell you the truth, I mean, this is one of those special years that Drew Brees is having. And I don't know that by the time this is done, Drew Brees is on a pace to have a year that nobody's ever had before. So
right.
I don't
take
think
him out of the equation.
Well, if you take him out of the equation, to me, it's Andrew Luck hands down. And that's just because he is the most valuable player in this league. Because if you took him off the Colts, they'd be a 3 or 4 win team. I mean, and I'll tell you what, the other guy that gets ignored that I think belongs in this conversation is Big Ben, because I think since a slow start at when they were 2-2, I mean he's played his ass off since then. I don't think he gets the respect he deserves.
I tend to agree with you there. He's having a good year.
All right, so let's go to yesterday's Browns-Bengals game, where the Browns won 35-20. Of course, Andy.
Hey, just a news flash. Did you guys hear that the Jags fired their offensive coordinator this morning? Nathan.
No.
Yes.
You know what?
Yeah, they fired him.
You know what, Steve? That's kind of like teasing me, because we're going to the Bengals-Browns. I thought you were going to say, "Hey, did you hear that the Bengals fired Marvin Lewis and Hugh Jackson?"
I'm sorry.
I know.
I want to get that in before I interrupt it again.
That was really, really mean. All right, yesterday, the Browns beat the Bengals 35-20. Baker Mayfield throws 4 touchdowns as he becomes the second straight rookie quarterback to dismantle the legendary defensive coordinator Marvin Lewis's defense. I don't know. Is there anybody here that doesn't think Marvin Lewis should have been fired 5 years ago?
Crickets.
Okay. Is there anybody that doesn't think he should have been fired 10 years ago?
I haven't followed the Bengals close enough in the last 10 years, but it seems to me it's a pattern that's developed in that city where he gets teams in the playoffs, but then fails miserably. And I've seen other coaches fired to lesser offense.
Because this is 3 straight years where they're not going to make the playoffs.
Listen, the first couple of years in his tenure, I don't think they were terrible with him and Dalton. But once we've seen it over and over again, then yeah, it's time to cut bait. Which is why I don't argue with you at all on your Jason Garrett take.
Yeah, and I mean, in the end, that's the biggest reason. I don't care who the Cowboys or Bengals players are. As long as the owner and the head coach are the same, nothing's ever going to change. Neither one of them's going to a Super Bowl. Neither one of them's going to sniff a Super Bowl. They may go 13-3 in the regular season, but then they're going to lose the Giants in their first playoff game because that's just the way these teams are built. I think people are...
You have the out. I think Marvin Lewis is out, and the ownership's out. Is they'll come out in a press conference after the season and say we were in first place until A.J. Green got hurt. And that buys them another year.
But that's not true, is it? Because I think they've been in second place for about 3 weeks. But you know what? I don't care who gets hurt. It's your job as a football coach to have your team prepared and win the game. If your quarterback gets hurt, it's like the 49ers. The 49ers quit on Shanahan. The first time they've done it this week. Shanahan needs to go. When your team quits on you and you're the head coach, I have very rarely ever seen a coach come back from that. And about the only time I could remember it would have been actually the Bengals, 87-88 with Sam Weish. That team quit on him. They came back. But the difference is they had Paul Brown guiding them. Bengal fans want to blame Andy Dalton. And the first sign that somebody is just a football fan and that they have no football knowledge is they immediately blame the quarterback. And when you look at this, since 1991, Andy Dalton has not been the quarterback. He's been the quarterback since 2010, or 2011. So the first 20 years of that was not Andy Dalton's fault. And when it was blamed on Carson Palmer and fans ran him out of Cincinnati, he immediately went and took a team to the NFC Championship game. So Bengal fans are stupid. Mike Brown is a loser. And I can't stand Marvin Lewis. The thing that stood out to me the most was this. Risley, I'll go with you on this. Hugh Jackson standing on the sideline yesterday during the game. Demarius Randall intercepts a pass, and he walks over and he puts the ball in Hugh Jackson's gut. Hugh Jackson pats him on the head. Is there a bigger bitch move you've ever seen a coach do than that?
No.
Could you imagine?
What is Hugh Jackson's title with the? What is his title with the Bengals? Is he defensive coordinator?
I think he's the masturbatory coach. But when we look at this, what do you think would have happened if, like, Sam Bowie would have blocked a shot out of bounds, ran over, grabbed the ball, and stuck it in Bobby Knight's gut in 1981? What do you think happens?
It wouldn't have been pretty.
What do you think?
Knight would have left Indiana. Knight would have left Indiana about 25 years earlier than he did.
Yeah, and the saddest thing to all this
He'd
is
have gone the Woody Hayes route real quick.
Hey, and I wouldn't have blamed him because you know what? Hugh Jackson yesterday could have got some of his self-respect back, I think, Anthony, by firing the ball back at Randall and tackling him. I'd have wanted that guy to be my head coach at that moment if he would have done that. But instead, he did what Marvin did. And, I mean, at the end of the game, the Bengals don't get the first down when they're trying to make the comeback. And they show Marvin, and he's just clapping. Now, the first sign of a shitty coach to me is a guy that stands there and claps. Because you know who else claps, Anthony? Jason Garrett.
That he does. He claps and he stares.
Yeah. He claps, he stares. He stands around somewhat uncomfortably when Jerry Jones comes down on the sideline at the end of the game. But other than that, these guys are not football coaches. And any Bengals fan that blames this on anybody but Mike Brown is insane. And the same thing with the Cowboys.
Mike,
what?
Let me ask you and Anthony a question. What is the premise of the NFL where coaches get fired for losing consistently and they immediately get picked up by another team? Don't you kind of, in the real business world out there, if you fail miserably as a salesman year after year after year, sales companies will just not hire you.
Yeah, and
they'll say, you don't have your resume is not good enough for me to bring you to represent my product. But yet, guys like Hugh Jackson immediately gets picked up by, of all the teams in the NFL that should pick him up, the Bengals are the last team that should pick him up because they're reeling as it is already. And they're bringing in a coach whose combined record in the last 3 years is, what,
34 and 1 or something. And I'll tell you, it's what all these teams do.
Well, what is that mentality?
Dude, look at this. The Giants, their head coach, last name Shermer. You know, the 49ers coach, last name Shanahan. It's an old boys club.
Shula.
It's nepotism.
Your name, it's like your name gets you the job.
Yeah, the Giants, you've got Shermer and Shula as coaches. Now, if it was Don and Fritz, they'd be in good shape, but it's not. It's Dumb and Dumber. And
what is that mentality?
I don't know. It's the way it's always been in the NFL, which is why the coaching in the NFL, so many guys get fired. But then they fire him and they'll rehire him. You know, Hugh Jackson, if he doesn't become the head coach in Cincinnati or the offensive coordinator in Cincinnati, somebody else is going to give him at least a quarterback coaching job or a wide receiver coaching job because it's just the way it is. It's almost like once you're in the club, you got a job for life, Anthony.
Is anybody in Cincinnati calling for, a quarterback change for
Everybody
Driscoll?
Does. They have since
regardless of Dalton's injury. Regardless of Dalton's injury status.
Yeah,
okay.
Because they're idiots. Because Jeff Driscoll is not ready for that. If you watch him yesterday, he had a throw he could have made to Tyler Boyd that probably cuts it to a one-touchdown game. But his problem is, it's the first time he's played in the game, he was locking on the one receiver and throwing there. Andy Dalton is an NFL quarterback who someday will win a playoff game, is my prediction. It will not be in Cincinnati. And Bengal fans at the same time will be bitching about the guy who's failing who came after Dalton.
Yeah, I agree with that.
My problem with Andy
will have success elsewhere.
My problem with Andy Dalton is his stupid blind loyalty to the Bengals.
No, well,
I like to see that kid get out of there and go play somewhere else.
He will get out of there.
He's got a chance to win.
This will end up like Carson Palmer within the next 2 years, where he's going to make demands on Mike Brown that Mike Brown will not meet. And the thing is this, the only reason the Bengals made the playoff run for 5 years was Carson Palmer. Carson Palmer demanded the Bengals do stuff the Bengals wouldn't do. They let him go, and then they immediately started to do some of those things. And everything got a little bit better for a while. But Marvin Lewis is basically just a dude that stands on the sideline, claps from time to time. He has no clue what he's doing. And let's face it, it's become painfully obvious. He was a great defensive coordinator because he had Ray Lewis, Rod Woodson, and those guys in 2000. Just my opinion, for what it's worth. Let's move on. I'm tired of talking about the Bengals. I'm writing an article you can read on thegruelingtruth.net, though. That should be interesting because I found out some things, too. But you can check that out later today or tomorrow morning. The Seattle Seahawks, and this was a good call by Riz, are now 6-5. They beat the Panthers. The Seahawks are now a playoff contender. And Russell Wilson's a guy I would put in my MVP candidate things, too, if it wasn't for Drew Brees going off. Cam Newton, the numbers look good, 25 for 30, 256, 2 touchdowns, an interception. Christian McCaffrey runs for 125, has 112 yards receiving. I'll tell you, though, I think the thing that keeps them from being a great offense, Anthony, is this. It seems to me like all they got is McCaffrey. I know Drew or DJ Moore had a good game, but this team seems to run through 2 guys, Christian McCaffrey and Cam Newton, and I think it's hard to win that way anywhere, much less the NFL.
Do you think that the Seahawks have enough playmakers?
No, but they got Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson is someday going to be a first-ballot Hall of Famer. Cam Newton will be a first-ballot Hall of Famer because he's black and he's big. And I'll say that right now. Cam Newton is not a great quarterback. Cam Newton is a front runner. Russell Wilson is a great quarterback. Russell Wilson leads his team. Russell Wilson brings his team from behind to win. Cam Newton doesn't do that. Cam Newton is just a dude that likes to dress up, wear some stupid-ass clothes after he gets beat, and then act like a freaking baby and run off the podium because he can't stand the heat. He's a joke. That's why this Panther team is not that good. That's why they'll never win a Super Bowl. They're just not, because Cam Newton's not that guy. Russell Wilson's that guy.
Yeah, I agree. Russell Wilson's one of the best in the NFL. I think Tyler Lockett emerging is pretty big for him because it really was only Doug Baldwin for the past few years. And Lockett was there, but he never played to this level before. David Moore, another wide receiver, and Nick Vannett at tight end. I think they have some playmakers that are not really known to be playmakers, but they're really going to start emerging now. I think the Seahawks they can make a little bit of a run in the NFC.
Now, see, the thing about this is this. When you talk about Tyler Lockett, David Moore, see, the thing is playing with Russell Wilson makes other guys better. It's kind of like playing with Larry Bird or Magic Johnson in the NBA. They're going to make you better. When you look at Cam Newton, DJ Moore's all right. Curtis Samuel should be putting up numbers. He's not a bad dude. Greg Olsen, he doesn't make people better. If you look at Tom Brady, look at all the guys that all of a sudden became, like the Chris Hogans, the guys that all of a sudden became really good players because their quarterback was Tom Brady. I think Russell Wilson's the same way, Steve. I think he makes everybody around him better, just like Drew Brees does, just like Tom Brady does, and I think that's what separates them from everybody else. And Andrew Luck.
I agree. Yeah. So, I don't know if Andrew Luck's in that category yet.
I think he is. I think the team that he took to the AFC Championship game, was that 3 years ago? Had no business being there.
Yeah. But I love Russell Wilson as a player. You said, do they have enough offensive firepower? I think Russell Wilson gives you 2 or 3 options every play. He reads the defense better than anybody. He makes smart decisions 99.9% of the time. You don't see him make stupid plays, and you don't see him get ravaged. And he just doesn't make the costly mistakes. And I know you're not a big fan, Mike, but I think everybody underestimates Pete Carroll just a little bit. He's
I think
a good NFL coach.
I'll have Joe Kelly on again sometime. We'll talk about Pete Carroll and the way he coaches his teams.
Yeah, well,
but he may have gotten better.
The guy, he finds ways to win. I think the combination of Carroll and Russ Wilson right now are what's driving that team. And I think that they've got as good a chance as anybody being in the playoffs.
Well, I think this. I think Russell Wilson is the big factor there. I mean, Russell Wilson is going to go anywhere and be successful. Pete Carroll's not. I may be nuts.
Well, but he's not anywhere. He's at Seattle with Russell Wilson. And, sometimes just being in the right environment, making sure you're doing the right thing in the right environment and not screwing it up, sometimes makes you a great coach.
Yeah. All right.
I mean, I can relate back to 1981 when Isaiah and Knight were going head-to-head over control of the babasketball team. Knight finally just backed off a little bit and let Isaiah take control of the team.
Risley's taking over, and from there you guys want to...
No, in all seriousness. I mean, he just is one of the greatest coaching moves Knight ever made, was just to let Isaiah go. I mean, they were both rattling for control of that team in 81, and we weren't going to win with them both bucking each other, but a great move on Knight's part was just back off and let it go and let Isaiah go. And then we never got touched again. Won the last 10 games of the season. So I think Pete Carroll in that mode, by maybe not overcoaching and letting Russell Wilson do his thing, is going to drive the Seahawks into the playoffs.
All right.
But I agree with you on Cam Newton. He's just such an up and down front runner player that you can't rely on him to win a brutal game. Like you said, if they get out front and they get ahead, he'll be flashy, he'll look pretty. But in this gut check game like we just had with Seattle, that's why I went with Seattle for that game. I'd say head-to-head, Russell Wilson versus Cam Newton. If this game's close at the end, you're going with Russell Wilson, no matter where they're playing. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, and the thing is this. People will go back to the Super Bowl with Cam Newton, Anthony, where he throws the fit after the game. I didn't. I mean, you lost the Super Bowl. That hurts. You're a young guy. The thing that worries me is 3 years later, he's still doing the same thing. He's never learned his lesson.
No, and it's always the same repetitive type of thing. Remember last year he had that incident with the female reporter. He's very immature.
Yeah.
And it's usually those type of players that they don't win.
Yeah, they don't because they are not leaders. And your quarterback has to be a leader. He is not a leader. He is a guy
Anthony,
that is just a front runner.
That's such a great observation, Anthony. Cam Newton has just never matured. I mean, he came out of the blocks as an immature. Anybody saw this potential in him. But you look at guys that like Drew Brees or Andrew Luck or guys that have matured. Like we look at Andrew Luck who wanted to be a running back or a linebacker in his early years. He's matured. Except sticking him out on a wing and throwing a pass 3 feet off the ground to him. He had to extend his elbow, shoulder, and everything. About got him killed on a dumb third down play. But Cam Newton has just never matured as a quarterback and never gotten it to the next level where we all thought he had potential to go to be a great quarterback in the NFL. He's never progressed beyond being a great athlete.
You can say Cam Newton is the NFL's version of Russell Westbrook.
Yeah, good comparison.
Down to the fashion.
Yeah, because you know what? The fact that you're putting that much thought into what you're going to wear after the game worries me about how much thought you're putting into the game. More more style over substance, I think. Next up, Monday Night Football tonight. The Houston Texans will put their 7-game winning streak on the line tonight against the Tennessee Titans, who try to stay within striking distance in the AFC South. Let's face it, guys, the AFC South's been all over the place this season. Texas started 0-3, now leading the division at 7-3. You had the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have been an absolute disaster. They were the heavy favorites coming in. I think the Titans at one point were 4-1. Now they're 5-5. So we've kind of had a reversal over the last month of who was doing what here. This is a huge game. When you look at it, Steve, what do you think is the biggest key to the winner of this game?
Marchiota, or the Titans quarterback.
Marcus Mariota.
Marcus Mariota, yeah. I mean, he's the key. We pretty well know what Houston's going to do. They've been pretty consistent the last 7 games. They haven't really faltered from the game plan. They're well coached. They're playing at home. They know what they're playing for. But I think, Tennessee lives and dies with a quarterback. And like I said, Tennessee's one of those teams that's up and down. One day you don't want to play them. Next day everybody wants to play them because you just don't know what they're going to bring. But how he plays tonight, I think, determines the outcome of the game. I don't see much hope for Tennessee. I think the Texans are just well coached enough. And they've got a tremendous amount of talent on that team, and they're the best team in that division. So I don't see them losing.
Well, I think this. Tennessee has to be able to run the ball to win the game because I don't think Mariota can get it done for him, Anthony, in the air. But the problem with that is the Texans have the best run defense in football. So with that being said, I think the Texans win a close game just because I don't think Tennessee is going to get enough out of the run game to make Mariota effective.
I'm picking the Texans in this, but it wouldn't surprise me if Tennessee wins. We've seen what Tennessee can do on their good days when they all play together, when they're given opportunities. That said, I think if you remember back during the 7-game win streak, there were times where this offense struggled. They struggled in the red zone. I think that's where this game is won. because the Tennessee Titans and Marcus Mariota, one of his best assets is the fact that when they're in the red zone, they walk away with points. The same can't be said about Deshaun Watson in the red zone. So I think that's where this game is won tonight, and turnovers.
Man, I'll tell you what.
If the Tennessee Titans win the turnover war, they win this game.
Well, I'll tell you, you know what we talked about earlier about head coaches and offensive coordinators and why they retread all these coaches? When I saw this about Hackett being fired for the Jaguars as the OC, I thought it was actually the Hackett that used to coach in the NFL 20 years ago, but it seems like it wasn't. It's his son, Nathaniel Hackett, was fired. So it just proves the point again. I mean, Hackett's dad was a lifer as an NFL coach, and he probably will be too. He'll probably be the kicking coach for the Bengals before this day is over. I mean, it's Paul Hackett, I think, is related to him. And Paul Hackett was the coach at USC, and then he was an assistant in the NFL forever. So before we wrap the show up, though, I'm going to try to make my dream come true.
Didn't he have an uncle named Buddy Hackett?
No. Maybe. I don't know. But
Yeah,
he coached
he was in the Love
for a
Bug.
couple weeks. All right, so here we go. I just punched in Marvin Lewis fired to see if anything would come up that we missed during it. And no, there's not. Well, hell. All right, it was worth a shot, though.
We're not going to fire him. How long is his contract?
Through next year.
So cheap, he's not going to fire. He's there for next year. They're not going to fire him. They're not going to pay him for nothing.
I think they'll fire him for Hugh because Hugh is like Mike Brown's illegitimate son. So I think that I think this also. I think it's possible. Terrell Austin was the guy that interviewed for head coaching jobs in the offseason. I think Marvin may have fired him and brought on Hugh and made himself the DC just because Hugh was almost unhireable for anybody, even Mike Brown. So there would be nobody on staff that could take over as an interim coach, and then Marvin would be good for the rest of the year.
Here's a good question to kind of wrap the show up, the debate. We talked about
said,
MVP.
But all right.
No, I agree. I agree with you. We all agree with you, so we're not responding.
Oh.
We understand genius. When genius speaks, we just listen.
Okay. Quick kiss.
Listen and absorb.
What you going to say?
No. We all kind of got an idea who we all think is pretty unanimous on who's going to be MVP. Who's coach of the year this year? I mean, there's some options out there.
Anthony?
What?
Who's coach of the year?
Who's the coach of the year?
Coach of the year.
I thought we were still on the Marvin Lewis thing. Okay.
Well, obviously, if we're talking about coach of the year,
with
Marvin Lewis is off the table.
Coach of the year, Sean Payton, to me.
Steve?
What's the guy in Chicago?
Nagy.
Yeah, I like Nagy. I think that New Orleans had the personnel there. It's not unbelievable. It's not as unbelievable what the Saints are doing as it is what the Bears are doing to me. And I'm going to tell you what, right now I'm going to start looking at Frank Reich a little bit too, but I don't think he's at that level. But the Colts are making one of the biggest turnarounds.
Dude, if they end up with 9 or 10 wins and make the playoffs, I think he's got to be at least in the top 3.
Exactly. Yeah, he's heading that direction. He's heading in the right direction. But Sean Payton's an obvious choice. I get it. But the Saints were loaded coming into the season with a good history of the last 2 or 3 years.
I don't think they were loaded because when you look at their wide receivers outside of Michael Thomas at the start of the year, nobody really jumped off. And I don't think anybody outside of me picked them to win the Super Bowl at the start of the year. So
I think what the Bears are doing this year is pretty remarkable.
Hey, I'll give you one. I'll see what you guys think because I haven't heard this name brought up. Andy Reid. He trades away his quarterback that takes you to the playoffs every year, brings in a guy, Patrick Mahomes, who's basically a rookie. He played 1 game last year, and they're better off now than what they were with Alex Smith. I think that, Anthony, what Andy Reid's done has been big-time overshadowed.
I don't know if Andy Reid is getting necessarily overshadowed or we're waiting for the next step from Andy Reid.
Yeah, wait for it to fall on their face.
Exactly. First playoff game.
Because this isn't new. I mean, Andy Reid had dominant teams in Philly. We know Andy Reid can do this in a regular season.
Yeah, but he's doing it with a quarterback that a lot of people didn't think was going to be that good in the NFL. And he did take a risk by letting Alex Smith go.
Maybe in my world, in the fantasy football world, Pat Mahomes had a ton of hype. Which doesn't translate to wins, but, the talent was always there with him. I just feel like, and I love Andy Reid. Andy Reid, regardless of winning a Super Bowl, belongs in the Hall of Fame.
No, he doesn't.
But
I don't like Andy Reid. I just like him this year.
I need to see him I need to see him go past the AFC Championship.
Right. I can't pass judgment on Andy Reid until he wins some playoff games because historically the Chiefs bomb in the playoffs.
Well, historically, you got to remember this. The Chiefs have bombed in the playoffs since Super Bowl IV. And that's
right. My dream is the Colts make the playoffs and get wild card and have to go play at Kansas City. We're in the second round.
Because if you look at it, if you remember, what was it, 97? The Chiefs were like 13 or 14 wins. They were the number one seed. They played Denver. They lose 14-10 at home. I think the Colts beat them. The Colts beat them in was it the divisional playoffs in '96 at Kansas City.
At Arrowwood, Kansas City.
Arrowhead, and I don't know what the hell Arrowwood is, but Arrowhead Stadium.
Actually, we had a training hotel with Pfizer at Arrowwood, so that's why I'm saying that.
It's the first time I've had to get you to say the right word all day, and you made it almost an hour. So I think you did really good, Steve.
Thank you. I take that as a compliment.
But I think Marty Schottenheimer's biggest jinx wasn't that he couldn't win a playoff game. It's that he attempted to do it in the cities of Cleveland, Kansas City, and San Diego. That's why I think Marty Schottenheimer never won a Super Bowl. That and that dude from the Chargers didn't just fall on the ball when he intercepted it. That was the biggest reason. But, all right, guys, we got anything else we want to talk about?
Well, who's your pick? Did we hear your pick?
Oh, no, I don't give my pick. I don't believe in giving picks this early in the season.
Wow.
Actually, the reason I didn't want to give my pick is because I agree with Steve. So, yeah, I think right now it's got to be Nagy, whatever they call him. But I do think you could see a Frank Reich. And you got a few teams like the Broncos who, if they went out, and I think they could maybe make it interesting for their coaches too. Because I don't think the Broncos or the Colts were teams that a lot of people thought were going to be playoff contenders. Anthony, anything else?
No, I'm just really excited, obviously, for Thursday night.
We need a Cowboys Saints. We need a Cowboys Saints prediction from everybody since it's on Thursday night. Anthony?
I'm obviously going to go Dallas.
What's the score?
I'm going to say 31-27.
I thought your defense was great. Steve, what do you got?
Holding the Saints to 27 points is great.
Before you go there, remember you were talking about no teams ever won the Super Bowl with a read option?
Nobody runs
one of the Super Bowls, constantly. I looked it up. One of the Super Bowls that the Patriots won had a backup punter named Reed Option. So they did win a Super Bowl with the read option.
It did not. So
yeah, they did.
Quit trying to be funny. There's nobody named Reed Option. But go ahead. What's your prediction on the Thursday night game?
I want the Cowboys to win, but I think I don't think anybody's going to touch the Saints right now. That's not a team that's going to piss on themselves in any way, shape, or form. They're too well coached. Breeze is having too good a year. I'm cheering for the Cowboys now. I don't know why I am. Maybe Anthony's turned me over. I want to come in with a fat head in Indianapolis so we have a chance. But I just don't. I think the Saints win big. I think it's not a game.
I think it'll be a game.
Sadly, I mean, I wish it was different, but I just don't think it's going to be that way.
I say Saints 38, Cowboys 24. If it's a playoff game in New Orleans, it's 48-3. But hopefully it'll be a close game because you know how this works. You know, Anthony, Steve was ripping on you before, and then the Cowboys win a couple games, and now Steve's your biggest fan, and he likes the Cowboys.
No.
I guarantee
I like
this,
the move of
Anthony.
getting Amari Cooper.
Anthony?
I like the fact that they made a change and they did some things they needed to do to improve themselves,
Anthony,
which a lot of teams don't do.
if the Saints lose this game 41-6, then Steve's going to be all over you again, telling you how bad your team is.
Yeah.
No.
You know you.
Not when I predict it to be that way. That's not. No, if it's an upset, yeah, but not. I don't think this would be a massive upset
I hope
for the
it's
Cowboys
a close
to
game.
win this game.
I hope it's a close game. I'm hoping for a close game either way.
If it
If the
was in
Cowboys
Dallas-
can at least make it a close game and be competitive, I'll walk away happy. If they get blown out, then, then it was all a myth. The past 3 games.
I think that is what you come down to, because in the end,
if the Cowboys can hang, then okay. Then they lost to a better team. Let's see if we can play them again. But if they get blown out, then they're done. And then they all they did was go on a 3-game win streak against the mediocre.
yeah, but
And
luckily,
that's honestly
luckily
that's the best way I can put
the
it.
NFL is full of mediocre, so you can still get a 3 or a 4 seed and win a playoff game before you get bludgeoned by one of the 2 good teams. And see, as I said when we talked about Marvin Lewis earlier, just winning 1 playoff game doesn't seem like enough, does it?
I know I'm going to catch crap from Goodpaster here, but I still think the Cowboys are America's team.
They're
So
not. It was everybody
are.
knows it was manufactured. Okay, look at
I
what
don't
the
care if
Steelers,
it's manufactured. It's a
when the Steelers
label,
played the
it's thick.
Cowboys. Was that last
It's a
year,
label,
Anthony,
it's
or
thick.
the year before? Wasn't it like 50-50 in the stadium, Steeler fans?
Right in the Super Bowl.
No, just when the Steelers played the Cowboys in
Yeah.
Dallas.
The Steelers travel really good though.
Yeah, that's America's team. Because what you got to remember is this: with the steel mills closing down in the mid to late 70s, Pittsburgh people are all over the place. They're America's team. The Dallas Cowboys, that was just done by the NFL, basically in Tex Schramm to make the brand even bigger. And it was a brilliant move. But the problem is this: Jerry Jones has changed that. There's no Tom Landry, there's no Tex Schramm, there's no Roger Staubach, and there hasn't been since 1979 or 80, where they've all been together at the same time. In 1979, they were America's team. But you had America's quarterback in Roger Staubach. You had Tom Landry, a great God-fearing Christian man, as the coach. And that's just the way it was. But things have changed since then. And, that's the main reason I don't think Jerry Jones is a Hall of Famer, because I don't think the Cowboys had the mystique that they had before him. I think he had a chance to do it, and he blew it by getting rid of Jimmy Johnson. But it's just my opinion. I could be wrong.
you know what I watched the other day? North Dallas 40.
Cowboy cheerleader movie? Oh. Okay.
No, North Dallas 40.
Oh, that's an awesome
Burt Comby
movie.
was in. That's a good movie. Burt Comby was in the Dallas Cowboys cheerleader movie.
Yeah, I've interviewed a couple guys that played for the Cowboys at that time, and they said, yeah, that's exactly what it was like. Was that Peter
I
Gent?
got to believe it.
I think
yeah.
Peter Gent wrote that movie.
Peter
Yeah.
Gent wrote it, which is going to be pretty accurate. He was good. He dug in. Yeah.
Oh, and you got Nick Nolte. Mac Davis did a great job as the quarterback, too, even though he didn't look like he was a quarterback when he threw the ball.
Got
But it was still all
Matuzak,
like the
Bo
movie.
Svensson.
Yeah. That was a really good movie. And then, of course, you had the late 70s Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders movies. You've seen those, haven't you, Steve?
No, I never watched him.
Yeah. See, Anthony, Steve don't like girls. All right, Anthony, you got any final words?
No, just looking forward to the game tonight, and then Thursday. Thursday's a big day.
All right.
Good luck Thursday.
Yeah,
Mr.
thanks.
Risley, I'm sorry, but he's not playing Thursday, so you don't have to wish him luck. Steve, you got any final words? It's not like
Reed
Anthony's
Option
going to
did
get
play for
injured
the-
using the remote.
Reed Option did play for the Patriots.
No, he didn't. Is that your
I'll make you
really?
Google it.
After an hour, that's your last final word. All right. So, guys, we're going to wrap it up. Make sure you listen to all the shows on thegruelingtruth.net. Tomorrow, me and Steve will be back to talk about the college football playoff situation. Of course, we had Michigan lost, so now you've got a little Ohio State, Oklahoma, Georgia, UCF controversy, and Mackenzie Milton, UCF quarterback, broke his leg or whatever he did horrendously on Friday, which changes things for UCF also. So make sure you check us out tomorrow as we discuss that. You can hear all of our shows on iHeart. What?
Why don't we invite Anthony to come on Friday for a guest appearance, talk post the Cowboys game?
Well, we could do that without interrupting my closing to the show. I mean, I could just.
Well, you weren't going to get to it
afterwards. Yeah, I was.
Ask him if he wants to. Ask him if he'd like to join us Friday.
Oh, Jesus.
Post Cowboys.
Anthony, would you like to join us
Yes.
Friday post
Yeah,
Cowboys? I was going to ask him anyway, Steve. You didn't have to interrupt my. He always interrupts the ending to this show, Anthony. It really bothers me.
No, yeah, I'll come on.
Okay, now Steve, may I finish?
I'm done.
Okay. Remember, you can hear all of our shows on Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Anthony Cervino, Isaiah Thomas's little brother, Steve Risley, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak. All right.